Most bad luck is not fate. It is not the universe bullying you. It is you ignoring a warning system you already had, and then acting shocked when the damage arrives. You feel it first, quietly. A knot in your chest, a dull heaviness in the room, a sense that something is off, even while you can still talk yourself into it. And then you override that signal. Again and again. And when the consequences show up, you want a villain. Heaven, stars, other people, the economy, anything except the most uncomfortable truth. You saw the warning and you kept walking. Let's talk about the nature of intuition and why modern humans destroy it on purpose. Not because we're stupid, because we're afraid, because intuition demands action, and action threatens the identity we're clinging to. Welcome to the hidden self, where we stop worshiping comfort and start telling the truth you avoid in private. This is about intuition as an inherited asset, trained by millions of years of survival, and now treated like a superstition because it's inconvenient to rationalize. This is also about the pattern behind the pattern, why you keep stepping into the same trouble in different costumes until you finally learn the lesson you were already ready to learn. You will recognize yourself in the stories I'm about to tell, and if you don't, it's probably because you're the kind of person who can't tolerate being seen. Here is the first uncomfortable point. Misfortune often doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It arrives like a drip. Tiny drops that you keep swallowing because you don't want to be the one who admits they misjudged. Have you ever had a stretch of months where everything felt slightly wrong? Not dramatically wrong. Not everyone knows, more like a slow erosion. An offer that feels too easy. A person whose charm lands too neatly, like it was rehearsed. A workplace where the air feels stale the moment you walk in. A conversation where the laugh doesn't reach the eyes, but you still call it a vibe. You go home and you can't fully relax. You try to sleep, but your body refuses to settle. You wake up, check your phone, distract yourself, and start again. And then, later, you call it fate. You say, why me? You blame timing. You blame bad luck. But in reality, the earliest warning was already there. It was your body's way of saying, this is unsafe, and you ignored it to preserve the fantasy. That fantasy usually has a name, even if you never say it out loud. Sometimes it's hope dressed in denial. Sometimes it's pride. Sometimes it's the fear of being wrong. Sometimes it's the social pressure to commit before you feel ready. Sometimes it's money. Sometimes it's loneliness. Sometimes it's shame, because leaving feels like failure. Here is the ruthless question you need to ask yourself. Not why did this happen? Ask, did I step into the mud after seeing the sign? The sign might have been small, a partner who rushes intimacy but avoids emotional accountability, a boss who praises you while undermining you in the same week, a friend who always benefits from you but never carries you when you need support, a business opportunity that requires you to ignore basic due diligence, a family dynamic where you're trained to accept chaos as love. Intuition is the ancient part of you that doesn't need a spreadsheet to recognize danger. It recognizes patterns the way a smoke alarm recognizes smoke, not with language, with response, with speed. Modern life insults that speed. We overvalue slow thinking because slow thinking feels controllable. Slow thinking gives you a narrative you can repeat without embarrassment. It lets you believe you're logical, sophisticated, in control. But intuition is not magic. It's not an angel whispering in your ear. It's a biologically engineered protective mechanism that evolved to keep you alive when you couldn't afford delays. Think of it like this. Your brain collects a massive amount of information all the time. Your conscious mind is not the command center, it's a presenter. Under it is a shadow network doing fast inference, comparing the present to what it has already lived through, what it has already detected as safe, what it has already learned is threatening. When the threat pattern appears, you feel something. A tightening, a flutter, a coldness, a pressure in the chest, an urge to step back, or sometimes a strange calm that feels wrong, because it signals emotional numbness instead of peace. And then you do something fascinating. You translate the feeling into a story that excuses your decision. You say, I'm overthinking. You say, they're just stressed. You say, it will get better. You say, I deserve a break. You say, I'm just being picky. You say, I can handle it. You say, this is my chance. You say, if I leave now, I'll look crazy. Notice what's happening. The intuition is telling you something about risk. Your mind is negotiating with risk to keep you comfortable. That negotiation is the first betrayal of your hidden self. You silence your own internal alarm because the alternative is painful. Admitting you chose badly, admitting you misread, admitting that maybe you ignored yourself because you wanted something more than you wanted safety, and people don't like admitting that. So they call intuition irrational, even though it's the only thing they had before the crash. Let me paint a few micro scenes so you can locate your own pattern. Picture a first date. Everything looks good on the surface. The person is articulate, their outfit is thoughtful, their story is smooth, they laugh at your jokes, they mirror your interests. You feel charmed, but you also feel a small disturbance, not enough to cancel, just enough to confuse you. A flash of suspicion when they shift the conversation away from real details. A moment where their eyes flick away when you ask a direct question. A subtle impatience when you slow down. Maybe they dominate the timeline, trying to lock your schedule before they fully reveal their character. Maybe they talk about past relationships like villains, always someone else's fault. Maybe they compliment you in a way that feels too intense too fast, like you are already a trophy. Your intuition sends red flags. Your brain receives them. Then your brain does what brains do. It tries to make them harmless. You convince yourself they're just nervous. You convince yourself you're too sensitive. You convince yourself you're lucky, because part of you is hungry for certainty. You ignore the discomfort because discomfort threatens the fantasy you want to believe, that love arrives clean, that compatibility is obvious, that you will never have to learn painful lessons. Fast forward, you're in a relationship that doesn't feel safe in the body. You start paying attention to the patterns, but now you call them quirks. You start walking on eggshells, but you call it being understanding. You start shrinking your boundaries, but you call it compromise, and eventually the relationship breaks you in a way that looks like bad luck from the outside. But internally, you knew. You knew from the first night. You just did not want to stop the momentum, because stopping would require you to grieve the fantasy and face the possibility that you're not as wise as you thought you were. Now picture the workplace. You get hired. On paper, it's the dream job. The salary is good. The company has prestige. Your friends would be impressed. But on the first day, you feel an airlessness. You notice the old employees look cautious, like they're scanning exits. You hear sarcasm masked as jokes. You see how people talk about the old manager with a mixture of fear and contempt. You feel the tension in the way meetings start too late and end too abruptly, like the schedule is a trap. You feel it, and you ignore it because money and status are seductive. You tell yourself, I can tolerate this. You tell yourself, I'll adjust. You tell yourself, it's just corporate culture. 3 months later, you're exhausted. Your sleep is ruined. Your stomach is unsettled. You develop headaches that feel unexplained. Your body starts screaming in the language it owns. Stress. Here's the key. You didn't have to wait until you were fully broken to notice. You had early warning. It was there in the room, in the tone, in the unspoken threat. But you overruled it with logic, because logic can justify almost anything. That's not intelligence. That's self-abandonment. Now picture the money decision. You partner with someone because they promise growth. They sound confident. They have big talk. Their confidence is performance, not substance. They avoid paperwork. They speed through risk questions. They change terms whenever you ask for clarity. Your intuition doesn't need accounting. It detects inconsistency. It detects the way they treat people under them. It detects the way they dodge uncomfortable topics. It detects the strain in your gut when you sign. But you sign anyway, because you want to be the person who made it. You want to avoid the shame of being cautious. You want to avoid being called negative. You want to preserve your self-image as a fearless doer. And then the losses show up. The money evaporates. The story changes. Suddenly you're the one who should have trusted more, or should have foreseen it, or should have been smarter. But you were warned. You were warned by the mismatch between what they claimed and what your body felt. That is how intuition is used against you when you ignore it. The same mechanism that protects you also humiliates you later. Not to punish you, to teach you. Now let's go deeper. There is a reason intuition feels like a feeling and not like an argument. It's because intuition is fast logic. The brain runs a rapid pattern match before your conscious mind catches up. Psychologists describe decision-making as two systems. One is fast, automatic, and pattern-based. The other is slow, reflective, and narrative-based. The fast system reacts first. The slow system rationalizes later. So when you meet someone and instantly feel distrust, that's system one doing its job. It's comparing the micro signals your senses pick up. Facial tension, eye contact timing, the way their smile functions, the rhythm of their speech, their pauses, their emotional congruence. The slow system then scrambles to explain the reaction, because humans hate not understanding. You want reasons. You want evidence. You want a courtroom-grade justification. But intuition isn't built for courtrooms. It's built for survival. That's why you often can't explain it right away. You just know. Later, after the damage, you go back and you suddenly remember dozens of tiny inconsistencies that you dismissed in real time. It's like watching the smoke alarm after the building has already burned. And the most dangerous thing is not that intuition is wrong sometimes. It's that you train yourself to ignore it reliably. Over time, you dull the signal. Not because your intuition becomes weaker, but because your willingness to listen becomes weaker. What dulls listening is noise. Modern life is designed to keep you distracted. Your attention is fragmented by screens, feeds, constant social comparison, entertainment designed to keep your nervous system aroused. When your mind is constantly stimulated, you don't hear the quiet internal signal. You can't. Quiet signals require silence to be recognized. We also fear silence for another reason. In silence, you confront truth. In silence, you feel the grief you postponed. In silence, you notice the relationship that's been dead for months but you kept feeding out of habit. In silence, you feel the health costs you ignored, the anxiety you normalized, the emptiness you disguised with productivity. So you choose noise, you choose debates, you choose scrolling, you choose distractions, and you tell yourself it's being busy. It's not being busy, it's avoidance with better branding. Avoidance creates conditions where bad outcomes can grow. It's like leaving a garden unweeded because you're too tired to care. Then you're shocked when weeds take over. A person who stays in an abusive relationship often has their own internal bargaining process. Their intuition screams when the partner drinks, their body tightens, their skin knows before their mind admits it, and yet they negotiate with danger using logic as a sedative. They say he only gets like this sometimes. They say it's not him, it's his stress. They say he'll change when things improve. They say if I leave now, I'll have to start over. That they say people will judge me. Notice the pattern. You don't just ignore intuition. You use another kind of fear to silence it. The fear is not only about safety, it's about identity, it's about shame, it's about social belonging. It's about the cost of admitting you're not in control. And then, as if reality has no patience, the abuse becomes worse. Not because fate is cruel, but because your boundary training failed. Because you taught the nervous system that it can scream and nothing changes. When harm becomes irreversible, people call it a tragedy. They say, no one could have predicted it, but your body predicted it long before your mind admitted the prediction. Your body doesn't lie. You lie. Now we need to address something that confuses many people: opportunity and cost in intuitive decisions. Sometimes you don't listen to intuition because you're afraid of losing what you already invested. You think leaving will be admitting failure. You think you must see it through because quitting feels wrong. You become attached to the idea that effort should guarantee reward. So you keep funding the wrong thing. That is not just poor judgment, it's psychological entrapment, a sunk cost fallacy. The more you invested emotionally, financially, or socially, the harder you cling. And this is where intuition gets strangled. Intuition says, stop. But your mind says, no, we must protect the narrative. We must justify the past. We must not look foolish. So you double down. You keep arguing with people who never intended to understand you. You keep negotiating with someone who's already decided to exploit you. You keep working for a system that is designed to keep you small. Every second you spend bargaining with reality is a second you lose for yourself. Every dollar you throw into a failing project is money you can never invest into the right opportunity. But most people don't see that. They only see what they would lose by stopping. People say they want growth, but their behavior shows they want relief. They want relief from the discomfort of being wrong, from the fear of change, from the embarrassment of leaving. True growth requires the courage to stop being loyal to your own denial. So what does a wise person do? They treat intuition as a data stream, not as an opinion. They combine it with observation and verification, but they never ignore it. A wise person doesn't only trust feelings, they also measure reality with calm attention. They ask, what is my body signaling, and what are the facts around it confirming? They use logic to understand, but intuition to prioritize safety. This is a skill, and like any skill, it can be trained or it can be abandoned. You can become someone who listens, but you have to stop outsourcing your decision-making to external noise. Here's how. First, observe micro patterns. Don't listen only to what people say. Watch how they behave when no one is applauding. Watch how they treat service workers. Watch how they speak about their exes. Watch what they do when something doesn't go their way. Watch their reactions when you ask a question that costs them nothing but honesty. A person can hide behind polished language, but they can't hide their reflexes. Reflexes are where intuition lives. You don't need to catch them lying. You need to detect emotional incompatibility early. The body can sense when someone is congruent versus when they're performing. It's the mismatch that matters. When someone is genuinely safe, their energy doesn't spike every time you get direct. When someone is manipulative, their response to boundaries becomes telltale. They dismiss, they twist, they guilt you, they rush you, they punish you for slowing down. Second, focus on your body. This is not spiritual, it's physiological. When you're about to make a commitment, sit with your body for a few seconds. Don't rush to solve the problem. Let the sensation arrive. Do you feel spaciousness or tightness, expansion or contraction, ease or dread? Sometimes your intuition is a sharp no in the chest. Sometimes it's a slow fog. Sometimes it's a specific image that repeats in your mind like a warning montage. Your body speaks in timing. It reacts to energy and threat. Conscious logic often arrives later and tries to negotiate over what your nervous system already decided. Third, accept reality even when it's brutal. This is the hardest part for people, because accepting reality means you stop bargaining with what you want and you start facing what is true. You must stop hoping that the other person will magically become safe because you love them. You must stop believing that effort will transform a pattern that has been consistent since day one. If you want an example, look at the person who always promises change. They say the right words. They cry. They promise. Then the same behavior repeats with slightly different packaging. They don't change because they don't think they need to, or they think change is something you will tolerate while they keep their comfort. Your intuition senses repetition. Your mind refuses to accept repetition because repetition feels like a sentence. So you try to rewrite the script with optimism. But optimism without truth is a drug. Real wisdom is not positive thinking. It's accurate perception followed by decisive action. Now here is the part many people refuse. Sometimes you're not failing because you lack information. You're failing because you don't want the information to be true. If you accept your intuition, you might have to leave. If you leave, you might have to face loneliness. If you leave, you might have to face judgment. If you leave, you might have to admit you were fooled. You might have to rebuild. And rebuild is terrifying because it forces uncertainty. People would rather stay in suffering that feels familiar than step into uncertainty that could become painful in the short term but healthier long term. So they delay, they rationalize, they numb. And then tragedy arrives, and you blame fate. Let me say it clearly. The universe does not sit around sabotaging you. It doesn't need to. Causality is already enough. Your choices produce outcomes with cold consistency. If you plant carelessness, you harvest accidents. If you plant blind trust, you harvest exploitation. If you plant ignoring your own alarms, you harvest regret. If you plant tolerating harm, you harvest more harm. This is not punishment, it's physics. Life is not spiritual in the way people pretend. It is causal. It is also psychological. Your mind builds a habit of how you interpret danger. If you repeatedly interpret danger as misunderstanding, your brain will learn to keep dismissing danger. That is how people become their own trap. Now let's fix something. People often ask, how do I make intuition accurate?